Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, June 5th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about trellising pole beans in a tunnel, what is actually going on inside of a compost pile, and cover some of the basics of soil amending. So let's do it. All right, lovely Thursday to you all. I hope everyone has enjoyed the show this week while Mike is off gallivanting around Utah, moving, as he calls it, which to me sounds like a euphemism for dance parties. But, you know, to be fair, that is also an excused absence from no-till growers, so works either way. Anyway, I hope you all have enjoyed the interviews that we did these last couple of days. Like I said at the very beginning of this show back in, September? Is that 8 months ago now? What? I do want to start injecting the occasional guest host into the daily because, well, there are a lot of people who know quite a bit more than I do or have a totally different experience or take on the world or both. And that is actually much more doable for us when we are taking days off or to have a guest on to be awesome, like Aaron and Becca were this week. Anyway, seeing as it is Thursday, we will do the typical Thursday thing and take on 3 Patreon questions for the day. So our first Patreon question du jour comes to us from Patreon member Blair Aiken, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I really enjoy the stories you tell at the end of each episode. Thanks. Truly one of my favorite things about the show. I am holding out hope that someday the characters will go on the journey to the center of the compost pile. Seriously, though, I'd love for you to Elioff, explain it like I am 5, what is going on during the composting process. Thanks for all you do," end quote. All right, thanks, Blair. Fun question. I, too, am fascinated by compost. For me, it was the heat that started it. Like, why is this pile of dirt hot? But there are several aspects to compost that are intriguing, from the biology to the nutrients that are made available and so on. Obviously, I will only be able to touch on this lightly for the time constraints, but let's try and get as nerdy as we can about this process in a short amount of time. All right, I should say that what I love about composting is that it is called composting and not decomposting. In other words, it's the composition of something, not the deconstruction of it. If you throw some kitchen scraps on the ground, they will slowly decompose and effectively disappear into the soil and air. That's decomposition or deconstruction. But when you do it in a well-managed pile, you compose a rich soil-like substance loaded with beneficial microbes and plant-available nutrients. All right, so what is happening here? What is happening here when it comes to thermophilic or warm composting? There are basically like 3 main stages. You have the mesophilic, the thermophilic, and then mesophilic part 2. Or you could just say the cool stage, the hot stage, and then the curing stage. During the first stage, the cool mesophilic stage, bacteria and fungi that thrive in warm but not necessarily hot temperatures begin to break down the readily decomposable materials, and in so doing begin to generate heat. Think of it like a giant dance party in a small crowded space. The energy put off by billions of microbial bodies heats up pretty quickly. When that happens, a new set of heat-tolerant microbes, primarily bacteria, but some fungi as well, get in on the party. These microorganisms begin to break down the more complicated organic compounds like proteins, fats, and cellulose. This is typically where we start turning the pile and making sure there is adequate oxygen to keep the heat coming and to ensure all the organic material in the pile gets a chance to decompose by mixing the stuff on the cooler outside of the pile into the inside and vice versa. The heat will not only help in the decomposition process of some of the more complex compounds, but also contribute to killing the weed seeds and the pathogenic organisms that may be contained in whatever material you put in there. This stage will last until it is done being hot, usually around 2 weeks, but give or take. Then the curing process begins, and I'll talk about that more in a second. Throughout the composting process, complicated compounds are being broken down. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, among other nutrients, are being cycled through the microbial populations and or being turned into amino acids and eventually compounds like ammonium, a form of nitrogen that can be readily absorbed by plants. Some of these nutrients, like nitrogen, get locked up in more stable forms, like polymers, that resist decomposition and either get unlocked in the curing stage or eventually in the soil like a slow-release fertilizer. The curing stage is arguably my favorite stage, but of course, don't tell the others. This occurs after the hot thermophilic stage, when the mesophilic bacteria and fungi return with some invertebrate friends, like roly-polies, but also worms and spiders and all sorts of stuff. And those sort of macro animals of the compost pile, they can also help them finish breaking down the tougher lignin and cellulose material and turn those into stable, longer-lasting forms of nutrient-rich organic matter. This stage can last 6 or so weeks to a few months, depending on the feedstock. Like a bunch of wood chips could take a while to break down. and the conditions as well. So like primarily that is moisture. You don't want a bone dry pile because microbes need water to do their little dance party. At this time, a lot of microbes move back into the pile that couldn't survive that hot stage. In fact, I've also seen some composters recommend that it's actually the curing stage that is the best time to inoculate the pile with additional microbes from the forest, for example, like perhaps a la, a Korean natural farming preparation, or through a compost tea or whatever. Then, when added to the soil, not only do a rich array of microbes come with the compost, but plant-available nutrients give an immediate boost to plant growth. While the more complicated polymers slowly decompose, releasing their nutrients over time, the compost helps to add organic matter to the soil, thus increasing its water holding capacity, and so on. Compost truly is a wonder in that way, a neatly composed plant and soil food. Anyway, thoughts or questions or details I should have added? Impossible to cover it all in a short segment, but I am sure I will cover it all eventually. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, pole beans in the hoop house. Pole beans in the hoop house sounds like a children's book. Maybe it should be a children's book. BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruits, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join the mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL for 10% off your first order. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20-plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question, second one, comes from Patreon member Ian Andrus, who writes, quote, "Hi, I am growing pole beans this year for the first time inside of a tunnel. Wondering how market growers are going about trellising them," end quote. Great question, and thank you. Now, the first thing I will say is that not a ton of market growers do use the tunnel space for something like pole beans. That doesn't mean the tunnel isn't a suitable environment for pole beans. Tunnels just tend to be high-value real estate, and crops like pole beans are lower on the profitability scale for most of us, so using high tunnel space for them isn't always easy to justify. However, pole beans can be highly productive, so if you are able to keep them going through the summer, you could see a decent return on the crop as they continue to produce all year. For us here in a warm, humid region, it is a little tougher to get them through the summer in the field without some amount of disease on the leaves from they just stay wet. So a tunnel crop would actually make sense if they were a profitable enough item for the grower. Anyway, none of that answers your question, so I suppose I will try to do that. Not the worst idea. I feel like that is the job. So there are a few options in a tunnel for something like pole beans, and they are largely the same as, something like peas, for instance. First, a couple things to consider. Don't put trellised crops on the outside of beds of a tunnel, up against the sides, where you won't be able to easily, harvest from the outside. Well, you could, I suppose, try to harvest from the outside, and I would do that from time to time in the fall from some snap peas that we would grow on our old farm, which were delicious, by the way. Fall peas are totally underrated. But typically we grew just enough for the family because it's just a big old pain to harvest from the outside of a tunnel for most of us. But it could depend on what your tunnel design is. And if it's got tall enough, what we call hip boards, the high up board, if that's tall enough, you may be able to harvest pretty easily from the outside. I don't know. But the other thing with that is it may be restricting airflow. So you may not want to put them in the sides of the tunnels just to block the air from being able to come across your tunnel and prevent disease. Anyway, for either peas or pole beans, what growers may use is either something like the plastic Hortonova netting, which is just a thin UV resistant woven mesh that, to be frank, is not my favorite thing for multiple reasons. One, it's the quintessential type of plastic you could imagine floating in the ocean with adorable sea life trapped in it. Also, the Hortonova netting is really easy to tangle up. It just gets bound to each other and kind of loops and knots. And once that happens, there's just no coming back from that. We had some many years ago and managed to get a few seasons out of it, but just by being careful and rolling it up. But even being UV resistant, it will eventually break down. It's effectively just cheap woven wire fencing. So I would actually suggest or prefer the actual woven wire fencing if you want to go that route. Some 4 by 6 foot tall, fencing will do the trick nicely. Attach that to a T-post every, 6 to 8 feet, depending on, like starting off about 4 inches off the ground. And the sturdiness of it will be welcomed because it'll hold up well. Alternatively, and more perhaps budget friendly, is just use untreated twine and posts. Put a post every 6 to 8 feet and just weave twine, in between those posts, just sort of like a little wall of twine. Doesn't have to be a ton of strings, maybe one every 6 inches or so, just enough to have the beans have something to be able to grab onto and support them. You may need to guide them up at first by just, helping the plants find the trellis, which can be time consuming, but just depends on the bean. Now, you could also go more of a literal pole for the pole beans, which we discussed a bit before, where you use bamboo poles every few feet and tie them together with a string, then plant the beans at the base. So this system that can be iffy in the field for the amount of weight and vulnerability to the wind suddenly makes more sense because the tunnel will support it better. Then as they climb in any of these systems, the fencing, the pole, the string, whatever, you can come across the outside of the plants with an additional string to help support them, but also just to keep them nice and tidy and out of the way because tunnel space is very tight. All right. I think that's about all I can say on that subject. I hope that was at least a little bit helpful. Maybe there was an idea in there that would make sense for you, or maybe somebody else has an idea they'd like to put in the comments section. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll make amends. That works. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. Today's episode is also brought to you by Precip. Precip is billed as the easiest way to keep track of rainfall, and that is true, but it is a lot more than that. Sure, you can open the app and immediately see accurate rainfall totals, but you can also save locations to see historical rainfall totals, wind speeds, and all sorts of other nerdy details. Their radar-based technology means you can ditch the rain gauge. I usually have to do that anyway because the kids find a way to smash it with a baseball bat. You can ditch the rain gauge and start tracking rain and other growing conditions all on your phone. Click the link in the show notes to find out more. All right, back to the show. All right, our final Patreon question of the day comes to us from Nathan Leal Crisp, who writes, quote, "Hey, Farmer Jesse, I've been reading and revisiting your book whenever I have free time." Parenthetically, they write, "It's one of the best, most useful and helpful purchases I've made." Thank you for that. That's awesome. My question has to deal with fertility management section in the supporting healthy growth area. I am trying to convert your example amendments to be able to use at my own area, and I came up with this: 3 pounds divided by 250 square feet equals 0.012 pounds per square foot. And Nathan just gives a breakdown of that. They basically just translated that to square footage, and you can find what I was talking about in the Living Soil Handbook. Anyway, Nathan goes on, "I understand this is just one aspect of a good fertility management plan. I'm trying to find a general application that supports healthy growth of vegetables. The soil life, I'll supplement as the season progresses if needed, planning to use AEA, that's Advancing Eco-Agriculture products, Jadam, etc. as well to help support healthy growth. You also mentioned adding grass and bean meals. How do you add these to the equation? Are there any changes in your approach now that you have 1 or 2 more gray hairs? I'm dealing with clay/loam soil that's been beat up and tarped for around 6 months. It also has a slightly sour smell that needs some TLC, but I don't have the time or money for compost. One more question: is there a fact sheet or calculator for organic meals and amendments with genuine information alongside other amendments in context such as lime, gypsum, soil pH, soil type, reactions between amendments, interaction with soil life, biology, etc.? Thank you and God bless," end quote. All right, great questions here, Nathan, and thanks so much for the kind words about the book. So the challenge with soil and gardens is that there just really is no good general amendment routine that could be used in, say, Colorado to the same effect as in, say, Louisiana or wherever. Not saying the same amendment package won't work, but the soils are different, the rainfall is different, the pH, all of it. So you could be pushing something out of balance while ignoring a deficiency, or you could just be wasting money on stuff you don't need. Here's what I would recommend instead to develop a simple amendment routine for yourself. Get a soil test from somewhere like Logan Labs if you are in the US. If I like Logan Labs because you can also then subscribe to Organic Calc. It's actually spelled Organic Alc, but that sounds like an alcohol thing. Anyway, Organic Calc on growabundant.com, which is a great resource. Notably, not a sponsor, but for like $30, you can get all the Logan Lab test results analyzed with organic recommendations you want. But you could test several soil tests that way, or get the amendments and recommendations for several soil tests over the course of a year, which is cool. So in starting and maintaining a garden, that's a great deal. That will give you an idea of what your soil needs in your context at a relatively affordable price. Then that will give you also give you a yearly look at what you need and how the amendments you are using are doing. A lot of the work can be done in the beginning of a garden's life, in terms of amending it and get you through the many, many years that way. If you add the amendments at the beginning, and then you just kind of measure that over time and see how well they're holding. Most of those rock amendments will stay there pretty much forever. Things like nitrogen, sulfur, and boron are the few that are very mobile and need to be managed on a near yearly basis. But for the most part, a good compost will take care of nitrogen, but also some of the sulfur and boron if it is made with a good diversity of ingredients. Now, I know you said you can't afford compost at the moment, but those amendments will also add up. So it's at least worth breaking it down cost-wise and figuring out which will be more expensive ultimately. If it's the dry amendments and meals, then that's a fine place to start. You can then start making your own composts in the meantime and stockpiling those for the future. So to the part of your question about resources, the growabundant.com site I mentioned is where you could find the Organic Calc. Yep. And yeah, that's just a good overall resource. Then there are also places like Ohio Earth Foods, previously a sponsor. So just full disclosure there. And Seven Springs Farm Supply, not a sponsor that I can remember. So full disclosure there too, I guess. Both of those organizations will be able to help you if you give them a call. They both sell the products, so they'd be able to tell you which would work in your context for what your soil test said. Maybe I'm putting a lot of pressure on them, but you could at least try it. To the part about what I've learned with my additional gray hairs, which I should say is probably more than one or two in the last 5 years since I wrote my book, maybe like 7, but like just really big ones. Anyway, what I've learned is just the importance of getting it right in the beginning, and then the importance of having at least one great compost pile every season. Just one you really take your time with to make sure it is as healthy and vibrant as possible for the more complicated crops like tomatoes and squash and peppers, the ones you really want to last all season. I do still occasionally add that same amendment mix I discussed, but less so. I like a diversity of amendments, but I really just get such a great crop response from compost that is where I like to put my energy these days. I also don't like to become overly reliant on mined nutrients, minerals or whatever, rocks, or processed meals. Those are nice to have, certainly in the beginning, and for sure they can be effective, and they often give consistent, reliable results. But also, there's a lot that gets wasted in my region, such as wood chips and leaves. So I also like to force myself to find ways to integrate those more as well to address some of those nutrient issues. Compost seems to be my best bet, but mulches help too. So to simplify, if you want to, if you want your own regimen, do the soil test thing. That way you are not guessing and potentially overloading or neglecting nutrients that your soil needs. If you really, really want a good all-around nutritional approach with less labor, a good, well-made, or should I say, well-composed, nutritional compost is the answer all day long for me. Anyway, hope that was helpful. Otherwise, let's call it a Thursday, shall we? Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a 501c3 nonprofit. So donations are tax deductible, greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Huge thank you to everyone that has done that so far. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of June, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Leah Van Tassel, great name, Alexander O'Brien, Damian Rodarte, Damian, shouts, and John Rozier. So for our Kansantonians, it turns out deciding whether or not to take someone prisoner is, it's a bit of a complicated decision. So, the townspeople, after tying up the farmer and bringing him to the board meeting and feeding him, really well, because they're decent folks and also hospitable in general, just by their nature, with very little experience in taking hostages anyway, but who also have a lot of pride in their food. So they're kind of relishing the opportunity to show it off. Anyway, the debate gets heated. One side thinks that they cannot let this person go, obviously, because they will go tell everybody and then their cover will be blown. Another side thinks they can make him promise not to tell anyone. I don't know, maybe naive, maybe not. It's messy. But then the farmer says, may I say something? And basically he tells them that he doesn't think, beyond maybe some anthropologists, many people would really bother them. I mean, there would be a flurry of interest, but we're on a 24-hour news cycle these days, and things don't stick around very long. Honestly, he says, you could probably make a killing selling the stew that he was eating. It's delicious, and offering tours to this place. People would probably love to see some of these fascinating, different techniques that you've developed for living undergrounds and hiding your gardens and moving the animals so quickly. It's very fascinating stuff. This is kind of next level agriculture. Anyway, they had not fully considered exposing themselves to the world. No, that would be allowing the world to come in. The final decision, well, that is for tomorrow on the Kansantonians Make a Final Decision. These titles are very specific. Anyway, thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you then.